In this video, we're going to talk about the second part of control flow, which is conditions. We're going to introduce the concept of conditional logic and talk about the if conditional statement in JavaScript. With conditional logic, this is the first time we can encode behaviors in our code that make one decision or the other based on some input. Again, the way I want my program to work is if the user types in a secret word, then they get a special message. If they haven't typed in the secret word, then they get a default message. The thing that I'm going to use to create this behavior is an if conditional statement. And these curly braces are the set of code that is going to execute when this condition between the parentheses is true. So let's write the condition. I said that if the user types in something, which is the input parameter to this function, and here's my secret word. If they type in this word, then the code between the curly braces is going to run. So specifically, if input is equal to the string bananas. And then here for now, I'm going to just put a console log. And let's see this in the browser. I'm going to load my file, drag it into Chrome, and open up the console. I have my code open in my browser. First, let's see what happens when we just click the submit button. So this is the normal default behavior. Let's see what happens if I type in a word. This is still the same default behavior. Now let's see what happens when we type in the specific word that we were looking for. I get the console log in the console here. Let's review the syntax of the condition we just wrote. I have my if keyword here, and if the user has typed in my secret word, so specifically if the user has typed in, that's the input parameter, my secret word, bananas. So if input is equal to bananas, equal sign here, this is the logical equals. Then the code block that I specified, the curly braces, everything between the curly braces runs. So I only have one line, which is line 5. We have the behavior where the user types in the secret word, and we can see the console log in the DevTools. But what we actually want is that when the user types in the secret word, that they see a special message in the gray box. I'm going to make that change now. What I'm going to do is reassign the value of my output value variable inside of the code block. And in order for this to work, on line 6, I'm reassigning the value. That value needs to be defined beforehand. So I need to move line 10 before the condition. Let's try this out in the browser. I've loaded my code into the browser, and let's see what happens when we hit submit, and then when we do the secret word. As our programs become more complex, we're going to want a way to annotate the code that we've written inside the file itself with English language. The way that we can do this is with comments, which are a part of the code file that doesn't run as actual JavaScript. Comments are a way to leave notes for your future self and for other developers working on that code that describe what a given section does. So here I'm going to leave a comment that describes what my condition does. And the 2 slashes tell JavaScript not to execute this line as JavaScript. We finished a simple example of a program that demonstrates a conditional. We're going to move on to a different game that simulates a six-sided dice. In this game, we can build in more complicated conditionals. This first version of the game will simply be where the user rolls the dice and tries to guess what number comes up. Before we can talk about the logic of our dice game, we're going to talk about the math of simulating the six-sided dice. I'll be running some code directly in the console so that we can see the manipulation of these numbers first. I'll start with Math.random, which is the function that gives a value from 0 to 1. If we want a number above 1, we can simply multiply it by another number. And this is going to give me a random value up to but not including 8, so 7.9999 in this example. Next, we'll talk about math.floor, which takes a decimal number and rounds down to an integer. Let's put these three things together to create an integer from 1 to 6. First, I'm going to create a random decimal number from 0 to 5.9999. So math.random times 6. Then let's round this number down to an integer. So this number is now an integer from 0 to 5. Those are the possible numbers that we could get out. So actually, in order to get a number from 1 to 6, we need to add 1 to this number. So now we have all the steps we need in order to create a random number from 1 to 6. I've extracted the code we wrote in the console into the script.js. And now what I actually want is a function that encapsulates all these transformations in one block of code. So let's do that now. This function takes no parameters because it doesn't need any input. And the value that I return in the function is dice number. Let's begin implementing the main part of our game. The first thing I'm going to do is simply call the dice roll function. Then we'll console log the value. Let's see this in the browser. Now, whenever I hit the submit button, I'm rolling the dice. Let's see the values. Now we're going to write the condition. First, an empty if condition. And the condition itself is actually exactly the same as the last game. So input, and then equals to, and this is equal to the random value. And for now, we'll just put a console log. Let's try this in the browser. Now I'll try to guess to see if I can get the winning console log. I got the winning console log because the random number was 1, and I can see the winning console log here. Now we'll actually change the message in the gray box if the user wins. Just like before, inside of the conditional block, I'm going to reassign the value of my output value to the winning message. Let's save this and see it in the browser. Now I'm going to guess and try to win the game. You can see that when I guessed correctly, I see the console log and also the message in the gray box. The last details we can add are a message to the user if they guessed incorrectly, and also tell them what the number was that was rolled. So I'm going to change this default message to lose. And I'm going to add the dice number. Then I'm going to add the dice number to the winning condition as well. Let's save this and try it in the browser. Now I'll try to guess the winning roll. You can see that I guessed correctly. I saw the winning console log and I saw the message inside of the box.